This conference will now be recorded.
When tactics killed the strategy stars, 7 elements for the development of a holistic and sustainable commercial strategy. Well, thank you very much for listening today. What is today about? I'm sure you're very familiar with the term when TV killed the radio star. This is not what we're talking about today, but we're talking about businesses being up for the next chapter. Turn the page. At some point in time, I'm sure you have experienced this before, or you will for sure experience the need to open a new chapter. And this typically happens when there's great pressure from the outside, a great opportunity out there you want to hunt down, but it can also be a combination of internal and external factors that make you want to move on. So it could also be that you've experienced recent growth, your current strategies do not fit anymore, you've outgrown your current systems and process, there might be new competitors, or you aim to enter a new market, a new segment, you want to launch a new product into a new market, have developed a new service, and the way you've done things in the past simply doesn't fit anymore. Often we also hear that companies haven't grown enough recently, or possibly you've grown too quickly. Also very much a situation for businesses that have gone from a startup stage to a setup business stage, but they haven't pulled along their strategic systems and processes approaches. There are signs that your offering does not meet real market needs anymore. That we also often hear. It means that the product that was successful in the past is not as relevant to your target groups anymore. Also a sign that it might be time for the next chapter. Exciting times indeed. Today we'll talk about tactics versus strategy in that environment, and I think we can all relate to it. We'll all love thinking short term. We love throwing tactics at a solution at hand, at a situation at hand, because it makes us feel good. It feels active, it feels proactive sometimes, it feels like we can change the world quickly, we see an impact quickly, but it also quickly goes. You can observe individuals, you can observe companies aiming to get a quick result using lots of tactics rather than applying more of a longer term strategy often. And of course, that has its place, but when it comes to wanting to open a new chapter, having to open a new chapter, it would be much better to put time, effort, resources into the development and of course execution of a holistic, sustainable strategy. We call it commercial strategy across product management, marketing, and sales. So why do we call it commercial strategy and we limit it to marketing, product, and sales? So to us, our philosophy is that a great strategy starts with a market need, a market situation, and the product, the service, through its marketing and sales channels develops answers for these market needs. So whenever you develop a more holistic business strategy, the commercial entities within your departments, within your company setup is a great way to start, but I'll talk about it at the end, how you connect marketing, product, and sales strategy into a wider business plan. So today we're going to share some of our wisdom. We'll found 7 key elements that are key for developing a great, a sustainable, a long-term, and a holistic commercial strategy. Those are elements we've experienced with small, medium, and large organizations. We've implemented those elements with companies in different stages. So from companies in a more startup-y environment to quite developed, set organizations, which is always incredibly interesting, how to open a new chapter in a pretty set business. We have come to the conclusion it always comes down to those 7 key elements to make it work, and we're going to have a quick look at each of them today. Element number 1, market analysis, goes back to the strategy versus tactics. When if I ask you, do you truly know your market segment, your target market? You will probably say yes, but if we do a deep dive and look at market dynamics, competitors, market potential, and how you can develop in different scenarios over the next, let's say, 3 years. That's a typical time frame. You might not be lost for words, but might see that it's quite worthwhile to do a deep dive into this element. Element 2, customer analysis. Do you actually really know your current customer base and your target customer? I'm not talking about general target group, which describes an industry segment or a particular role of a person in a company you would like to win over. I'm really talking about detailed marketing segmentation. We're talking about the description of an ideal customer, and we're talking about the definition of customer persona. So maybe a quick excursion on ideal customer and customer personas. The ideal customer relates to an organization. So we're talking here about the pain points a certain customer has, which you can typically solve the best. So it's like a match made in heaven between a need and what you can provide, a pain point which you can solve. And it means that the customer life cycle value is makes it worthwhile for you. The behavior of the customer, the stage where the customer is in, fits your offering. It's easy to work with this customer. It makes it worthwhile both for the customer and yourself. The customer persona goes even beyond that. It's the actual individual people that typically work within that ideal customer business. So we're talking not about an abstract role, like I'm targeting the MD or the CFO. We're talking about the type of person. So you might well have different customer personas relating all to the same role like the CFO. So we're trying to figure out here, and we've done a separate talk on this, what are the pain points of this specific person, like the individual, which might actually be different to the pain points of the business, but you're doing a deep dive into what drives this person, what motivates this person, what makes this person pick, how can you approach this person, what type of communication. So very demographic, data-driven, but also behavior-driven. Of course, those personas, those unique single people are also abstract versions, because there's no point describing all type of people you're going to deal with, but we're trying to create archetypes of the typical people you're dealing with, which means you can then create solutions, communication, sales, marketing, product approaches to really fit that person. Because in the end of the day, it's not a company buying from you, it's an individual decision maker purchasing from you. Again, very good exercise to go back to your market environment now, your ideal customer, your customer persona, and look into the current pain points. So especially if you've been going for a while, it's incredibly hard to stay in touch with the overarching themes of your customers and your market. You sometimes know too much detail. Sometimes you're actually growing into a bit of a distance to your customers. But it's very healthy to take the time in this first and second analysis stage to look back into the pain points and the needs of the customer. Element 3, goals. If I'd ask you, what should this business actually look like in 3 years' time? You would be probably quick to say it should have XYZ return of investment, top line, bottom line, sales to different channels. But how does that actually relate to your vision and your mission? Do you actually have one? Is it very clear to everyone in the business? What is your big, hairy, audacious goals? Yeah, the BHAG. This is typically something we use to describe this one goal everyone in the organization can understand. It's this slightly crazy yet just achievable goal everyone is striving for. Other goals, we use the SMART goals methodology, making sure all goals we set are actually measurable, and this applies, of course, to financial goals, but it also applies to goals that define the culture, the setup, the market readiness of that organization. So very holistic goal setting approach, and we're always surprised that the goal setting stage is often overlooked. And of course, it's easy to say we want to grow X in 3 years' time, but it's meaningless because it's not necessarily followed up by a strategy, or the strategy doesn't follow the goals, and often it's not communicated across the company. So if you walk around a business and ask about common goals, you'd be surprised what answers you get and how diverse they are. Element 4, definition of the offering. What does my offering look like? How does it answer true customer needs? I spoke about it briefly before. This is about making sure the market needs, the pain points you've uncovered or uncovered again, do match what you can offer, and make sure the features and the benefits, the value propositions of your products and services have a match, both in reality, meaning product performance, service performance, but also in communication. The offering also includes your brand identity. What can your brand, depending on your market, but it also includes B2B as much as B2B2C and B2C. What can the brand offer a user, a customer? What values does it provide? What communication, what differentiation, and what USP? So again, element 4 is about tangible product attributes, but it's also about tangible and intangible brand identity attributes. Element 5, marketing and sales strategy. Huge topic, and of course I could fill an entire day, probably more, with talking about one of my favorite topics. But this part of the commercial strategy definition is about approaching my customers and leads, creating leads, managing leads, creating opportunities, and bringing them into a stage where they can become a customer. And then how do I look after my customers, through what channels? So this means strategically, we have picked the right person, we have the ideal customer, we know where to find them. So now we need to set up the sales channel on approaching those customers. We need to have a distribution framework on how to deal with them. We need to set up the right communication and marketing channels and tools and messages, along with the other parts of the 4 Ps like pricing, and to make sure what we've uncovered regarding needs, what we've designed regarding products, is also making its way to the customer through sales channels and marketing activities and tools. Element 6, systems and processes. So we are a huge fan of making strategies, initiatives, organizations sustainable and not dependent on the individual people, individual talent, luck, effort. We like to introduce approaches, systems, and processes that make a strategy stick. So meaning it's for the long term, it's sustainable. So one of the items we focus on in the sales and marketing area is a solution selling sales approach. So we're defining an approach and a process that is actually taught to the entire organization, which is very simple. It again depends on the needs, uncovering the needs of your customer and filling it within a sales approach that answers to those needs. So lead management, the same thing. How do you attract new customers? It's not talent, it's not having the best salesperson, it's actually system, process, and approach. Also, when we're looking at the technological basis, we do a fair bit of work around ERP and CRM. So again, it's a huge component for making your strategy stick, to have your commercial strategy being trackable. What customers are you approaching? What is going on with those customers? Leading your sales team, again, making it independent of an individual person or documentation document. Element 7, resources. So once you've defined your strategy, your execution plan, your sales, marketing, and product strategy pillars, you need to bring it to life through personnel, skill sets, time, energy, financial resources, to make it worthwhile and really enter into the next chapter. So typically we're talking, of course, about setting budgets, planning return of investment, but we're also adapting the organizational setup to the new strategy. And this is something that is often overlooked, to say we are going to turn the page, enter a new chapter, but really we're doing things the same way, even if it's different content. That is unlikely to work. So once you have a strategy, you have your activities, you need to adjust your organization to what you want to achieve. So that's often quite painful. What I mean by this is you might introduce a new sales channel, you might target a different segment, and it might mean that you have to set up your service, your sales team differently. You're putting a different focus in the marketing mix. So you need to ensure that you have the right amount and the right type of personnel skill sets available. And this is definitely the time to also think about organizational readiness. So for making sure that you have at your fingertips what you need when you need it. So think about outside solutions for the skill sets and the resources you need now also. So those were the 7 key elements for the development of a holistic commercial strategy. I'm sure you found very much common themes to what you're already doing, but it's about bringing them all together. And bringing it all together leads me to my additional final elements, some final comments. What else does it take? So we've gone through the 7 elements which are key, but there's 5 elements we keep talking about a fair bit in all projects. Also, what does it take to make it stick? What does it take to make this new chapter very successful? So one item is the communication of the strategy beyond developments that are involved from the start. So we just spoke about product sales and marketing. So we're talking about the entire organization, make them part of the journey. Because what we see often is that if you keep commercial strategy to the commercial team and you don't involve supporting functions, let's say like controlling, like production, like supply chain, that will enable the commercial strategy, that will turn into a problem later on. So make sure the development process, the goals, and the reason why is communicated early and often until it sticks also within your organization. Entering a new chapter means that you have to take everyone onto the journey, and the earlier you get people involved, the better it is. So, of course, a commercial strategy is not a business plan or let alone a business strategy. So what does it take to make it a complete business strategy? As I said at the beginning, I think it's a great way to start on the market end. So look at customer needs, develop product sales, marketing strategies, but then continue it in the execution part into other departments and bring it back together into a full business strategy. So commercial strategies, of course, look at the market, they bring in the insights and they develop the answer from the inside to the outside, but it also needs to work when you bring in other elements. So what that means is a commercial strategy can go so far, but you will need the accompanying and enabling departments to get full feasibility analysis and so on to really answer the question, is it worth it? So commercial strategy is I would say, the kernel, the start of a full business strategy. But again, it needs to be briefed into the other departments and you need someone to bring it all together in a full business strategy. I can't stretch that enough. It's where it often falls apart. Execution tracking, the art of persevering and resisting the tactics. I'm sure you're going to smile right now. It sounds very familiar. Execution is hard. So make sure before you even enter the execution stage, so you've set your goals, you've set your strategy, you've planned your execution, and then it's the play button. Make sure you have a team, a framework, a process, and a system to track execution. It will be the make or break. It's so easy to get distracted. Hence, we call it the art of persevering. You need to be able to handle it. You will be distracted. It will be very tempting to jump back into the tactics. And 6 months down the track, you look at your strategy PowerPoint and you have to admit you didn't stick to it. So be prepared. Resisting the tactics, we've just spoken about it. It's very tempting, but I think after you've gone through the full process, you know the reason why you've set certain strategy pillars. So resist. When the strategy star killed the tactics, you will have ensured that your next chapter will be successful. Thank you so much for listening. I enjoyed talking to you about our 7 elements. If you have questions, inbox us, have a look at our website. There's more material which you might enjoy. Thanks again for listening.